Cameron Dwyer, g'day mate. It's been a little while. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dan. Great to be here, mate.
Now, for everybody watching and listening, just give us a little bit of an insight into Cameron Dwyer, what it is that you're doing, where you've come from, how you've started in this space, and what's keeping you busy at the moment.
Sure. So, yes, my name is Cameron Dwyer. I am currently the Chief Technology Officer at OnePlace Solutions. We are an ISV in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, been building commercial products initially based on top of Sharepoint and Exchange many, many years ago, and we've sort of ridden the wave of everyone moving towards the cloud. And we just build a lot of product, a lot of end user adoption, sort of focused products on the Microsoft 365 stack. So for me, that involves, I guess, positioning of products in market, bringing new products to market, heading up a development team that's building these products, and I guess not only building the products but also running them. So that involves a lot of stuff on Azure, running Azure-based services out of Microsoft data centers with customers around the globe, keeping all the lights on with that. And I guess since we're selling things as subscription-based services, really showing value to the customers day in, day out, and making sure that we stay up to and ahead of what Microsoft's doing and able to enable our customers to get the most out of their investment in Microsoft technologies and really drive this digital transformation.
Now, mate, you're very well recognised in the development circles, and you are also an MVP in that area as well. Now, the reason I actually wanted to record a session with you is you wrote an article the other day that sparked my interest because I guess I always look at you as a developer as well, and probably a lot of others do as well. But the article that you wrote was almost a step-by-step process into how to use different Office or Microsoft 365 tools to solve a particular problem that you had. And the title was How to Set Up Teams in Microsoft 365 for Streamlined Knowledge Sharing Sessions. So we can, as you mentioned in the article itself, and I'll link to this in the show notes, it's similar to that terminology that we tend to use, lunch and learn or brown bag sort of sessions. Now, you started the article about starting with the problem, which I think was a fantastic example of how things and how solutions evolve out of starting with that problem. And the problem, you said that was, it was after after or during your sprint sessions, might have been a retro or something like that, and you had a need to set up these sessions as a vehicle to share knowledge within your development team. So just tell me a little bit about how that all, that all came about.
Yeah, you're 100% right on the retro sessions in our sprint cycles. It's probably one of the most valuable things that our team gets, and I think a lot of teams can get out of working through an agile process or a scrum process, is that retrospective. So every time we complete a sprint cycle, we set aside time and we have a retrospective on what's worked and what's gone well. But I think it's important here, and I have to keep our team focused on, it's not what we actually completed that sprint. It's not the actual work that we did, the code that we wrote, the products, the features that we shipped. It's about the processes. Like, what blocked you this sprint, or what caused you pain this sprint so you weren't able to get the job done? Like, where you're not sure, could you not get access to a system? Did you not have the right levels of access? Was machines not available to you? Was there something in that process that really slowed you down? And that's really what we focus on, in that, well, is there anything we can do about that to make it better going forward? And every sprint, I like to think that our processes and our systems get better every single sprint that we do. And it also gives me an opportunity. Often the things come up time and time again, and that's sort of where this one's come from. It's not the same problems come up time and time again, but what I'd been really hearing from the team and what I'd been observing was that we didn't have a consistent vehicle for being able to share knowledge within the team. I like to think we've got a pretty good setup here, in that every sprint our developers get what we call research days, which is basically time away from planned tasks where they can watch videos, read blog posts, try some things out, some prototyping on something they either want to do in the product that hasn't made it up the backlog far enough yet, or something that they've just read about, or a new technology they want to get across. So we give our developers time to do that sort of learning, and there's conferences to attend and things like that. But what I was noticing, it was more the knowledge, the very specific knowledge we were building up within the team. So things to do with why we do certain things within our code base, how certain bits of code or features work, and why it's been done that way. Because typically what happens when you're developing features is that it's only a small subset of your development team that are in there working on that feature. It might be 2 or 3 of them. And those 2 or 3 developers know it well. But as time goes on and maybe there's bugs come up or that needs to be extended and taken forward, new developers come in and they have to sort of make sense of what went on there. And sometimes it's not necessarily that the code isn't clear, the code's not documented well. Often it's just that we've chosen one approach of many to go through here. And it's almost like the thought process of the architect or the person that coded that up. They had a thought process in mind, and to them it was very clear why they did it that way, and it made sense to them. But without having that piece of knowledge shared, without getting that out of someone's mind, that same clarity doesn't sort of transcend developers and the passing of time. What I also noticed was happening was that we often had little mini knowledge sharing sessions one-on-one happening. So when these scenarios would occur, someone would pick up a task and they think, oh, I know so-and-so worked on that a few sprints ago. I'll just give them a call. And there's these one-on-one meetings happening where one of our members of a development team is getting another member of the development team across a certain section of the code. But that is just happening one-on-one, and the knowledge is not shared any wider, and it doesn't turn into an asset that we can reuse. So fundamentally, it really boiled down to 2 things. The other thing I was hearing as well was that maybe it was that person that designed a feature, and at the end of a sprint or in the retro, or maybe it's just I hear this in stand-ups, was that they'd learned something new or they put something new in place. And the terminology that I would often hear is, it would be great to get others across this. It would be great for others to know how this works, or for me to share how this works. And that's where it ended. It never actually happened. So it was really twofold. I was hearing people within the development team were wanting knowledge. It was like, I need to know about this, or can someone tell me about this because I'm struggling to pick it up on my own. So there's people wanting knowledge, and then there's also people that were in a position where they were really wanting to share knowledge. They had something to tell. So that was really the impetus for me trying to put this program together, was to give us a consistent way of doing those 2 things: identifying where knowledge could be shared within the team, where people are either have the desire to gain knowledge on a certain topic, or people have got the desire to share knowledge on a certain topic.
It doesn't. I know you're talking specifically about development teams here, but this actually encompasses pretty much every area of any single business. We often talk about, and you would have seen it before as well, these siloed pieces of information. You've got this team over here or that team over there, and they might be sharing, as you mentioned as well, maybe 1-to-1 inside of their team, or it might be 2 or 3, but in actual fact, it's that knowledge that really would be beneficial across an entire organization. So although, and what resonated with me with how you set this up and the explanation that you gave, is that it does really expand outside of development teams, which I think is something worth sharing, and people get a lot of value out of actually implementing this type of thing in their environments as well. Now, I'm assuming you would have been using Microsoft Teams and those type of tools for communication and meetings and stand-ups and all that sort of stuff already. There was a number of, and you outlined it in the article as well, there's a number of specific requirements that you did have, and you did sort of find a solution for, session planning and presentations and the recordings, let alone the storage of these recordings. But then something that's really important is making them discoverable. It's okay to have them recorded. They get recorded automatically, obviously, inside of the team, but making those discoverable and the way that you made that, and I'll let you explain that shortly, but I thought was, nice and simple, but very 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 practical and easy for people to find. And then you talk about the ramp up system, so bringing all of that together into the one place, even though you're using a number of different tools, I thought was very very good. So tell me a little bit about how how those requirements came about, how you went about coming up with those requirements, and then we'll step through the implementation and how you actually set it all up.
Sure. Yes, I guess in coming up with the requirements, I guess the because Microsoft 365 has a lot of the tools, and probably a lot of our listeners are already familiar with this. They're already using the tools. But I guess I like to take the step back and think, well, what problems are we trying to solve here, rather than just sort of diving in and half solving a problem by putting little bits and pieces in place. I knew that I wanted to run a program, and yeah, I guess I took that level and I took that step and stood back and said, okay, what do we really need out of this system to make this actually work and not just be something that we try for a couple of weeks and then it just fades away? What really needs to happen? What do we need to put into place to really make this happen? And as silly as it sounds, it's almost like running anything in business. You almost need to market this thing. You need to brand it. You need to market it. You need to give it a clear purpose. If I couldn't clearly define what the requirements were and what this was solving, how could I expect others to know the value of this within the business as well? So as I sort of detailed out to you there, I could see that people were having the requirements in the business. And that's probably the first thing of selling something to anybody is, what's the need? What's the pain? Do we really need this thing? And so that was pretty simple within my team, because for some it was an aha moment. For others, it's like, yeah, why did it take you so long to get this thing together? You got people everywhere along the spectrum. But yeah, I guess the first thing is that clear purpose. What are you actually trying to achieve here? And for us, it's knowledge sharing. And as I said, those two perspectives, people needing knowledge and people wanting to share knowledge. And then coming down to the requirements of that, it's like, okay, well, how are we going to identify what knowledge people want, and how are we going to identify those people that want to give knowledge? And so for me, that requirement was just we need some list, some area where people can drop their ideas to say, hey, I would like to know more about this. Or that person that comes out, they've just architected something new or come up with some new idea, and they've got that thought, I want to share this with others. Others need to know about this. So first of all, it was just we need an area somewhere where we can just have a list where people can put this stuff down, basically requesting sessions or saying, I want to present a session, and detailing it out. So that was sort of the first requirement. And
so that was going to be one of my questions. So that list actually acts twofold, does it? So for me wanting to say, hey, I want to find out more about this, I can use that list as well.
Yes.
As well as I've got this information. I want to present something, or I want to create content about that.
Exactly. It's the same area. It's the same group of people. And I guess that's one other requirement that I really had, and a need as well, was sharing amongst a team. So I didn't want it to be almost like a conference style where one person just says their piece with no feedback. Part of this was we wanted to make sure that the knowledge was really shared and the understanding was shared. So the content, the structure of these sessions, I wanted them to be about half-half between presentation and interactivity between the participants. And some of them, I actually encourage the development team, like, you don't have to be an expert in an area at all. I believe everyone's got something to share and value to add. And so some of these sessions, there's not a lot of structure in them, and sometimes there's not a lot of knowledge in them, but the actual knowledge is brought by the dialogue and the conversations that are had during the session. Other people can chime in where they might do things in a slightly different way and different knowledge, and they can bring it in. So I encourage people to suggest those sessions, even if they feel like they're not an expert, if they've got something that they want to share with others. But also, I wanted that list to be a way that the ideas could organically grow before a session happened. So having the ability to sort of add comments or ask questions about, oh, you wanted to share that idea, were you thinking of covering this and that? Because I really want to know more about that. And it sort of allows the presenters to actually get some feedback and start fleshing out some structure based off what the rest of the team is actually wanting to hear in that area.
Yeah.
So that was part of it, being able to actually work together as a team to sort of form these session ideas up, and also having some sort of voting system. So the team can go in there and they can see all the ideas that are down there, and they can just simply vote on them. We can see what's most popular and what people want to see, want to learn about.
So you're using obviously using Microsoft Lists here. How did you implement the voting system?
Okay, so the Microsoft List has got this built in. You can just go into the settings area of a list and you turn on ratings, and I think there's a couple of different options there, but the one I've used is just a star rating between 0 and 5. And that just, it allows you to vote directly on the list itself without having to open up any of the items. And you can see how many people have voted, what the average number of stars is.
Yeah, and each session. Sorry, I'm getting into a little bit of detail here around Microsoft Lists here, but each session is an item in that list. And are you using the commenting functionality of that list item to get that commenting functionality?
Yeah, that's right. So if you open an item up in the SharePoint list, the comments will just come out the side. The author of the item gets notified when the comments are in there.
Yeah.
Just using, that's the great thing about SharePoint. If your team is already using SharePoint and they know of the functionality of it, there's just so many things you can tap into there. So myself, sort of looking after the program, I just subscribe to notifications whenever anything in that suggestions list changes. So I can tell as soon as someone's thought about a session, I get a notification that someone's popped that session in there. So I'll go in and have a read of it and give them some encouragement. And if there's anything I would like to hear about that session, I can just pop the comments in there straight away. So without really having to build anything, just using the tools that are already there, we've got people being able to create them, comment on them, rate them, and get notified of them all quickly and really easily.
So that's the I guess that's the capturing side of it. From the implementation side, so we've got this SharePoint list. It is just a list sitting in your team site that's sitting behind your team. How did you make the user experience of this? Because there's some really nice little things that you've done with the SharePoint site behind the scenes and some tabs and things like that. So how did you make, not stereotyping here, but you kind of got to make it easy for developers, don't you, just to find stuff and things like that. But how did you accommodate that?
Okay, so as you say, there's a SharePoint site behind it, and I tried to make it accessible no matter how you arrived at it, whether you arrived through SharePoint. So the SharePoint site itself is we have a homepage branding for our ramp up program there, and we have the session list embedded as a web part. We've got information about the program. But probably where we're living more, the team's living more and conversing more, is directly inside of Teams. So we have a development team. So inside there, we have a channel for our ramp up program. And inside of that channel, you can have the tabs across the top of your channel. So all I've done is add that SharePoint list of session ideas, as a tab inside of that channel. So that channel is obviously where we talk about all things to do with our ramp up program. So just by going inside of that channel, there's a tab up the top. They can see the session ideas. And because that SharePoint view just comes through, you've got the full functionality of SharePoint there. They can suggest ideas, like you read other people's ideas, but they can also see the ratings and vote and everything directly within the Teams client.
Yeah. And what about the video? So the recordings, you're running these sessions as channel meetings, I assume? Correct.
So I wanted to keep everything. I wanted to make it feel cohesive, because Microsoft 365 is just a set of tools, set of technologies. Use it for whatever purpose you want. But I think where you really get success is where you can pull those tools together, put branding around it, and it feels like a system. It's not just some files over here and a list over there, actually pulling it together. So by pulling this together in a Teams channel, what we've been able to do there is any chat messages, whatever we have about the ramp up program, is done inside of that channel. We've pulled the session list through into that channel as well. When I schedule schedule the sessions, we do schedule them as channel meetings. So the meeting invites go in the channel, and anyone who's a member of that team gets it in their calendar as well. So it goes into their calendar, but the meeting itself is actually held in that channel. and that works well because, again, it just keeps things contained, but also the recordings automatically go into a subfolder in that SharePoint site underneath that team. So there's a recordings folder beneath that ramp up channel folder, and all your recordings automatically go in there. So no one has to, finish a meeting, finish the recording. We don't do any post processing of it. It's just the raw video. No one has to move it. No one has to rename it. It just sits there underneath this recordings folder.
Yeah. Now, Teams is obviously has it does have a search capability, but it's pretty poor. Now, you did you did an interesting thing, and a fairly simple thing. It's just there out of the box, right? To be able to present those videos inside of that SharePoint page. How did you manage to do that?
Okay, well, I'll tell you my first attempt. My first attempt was, okay, I know those videos are going to be sitting in this folder in SharePoint at the end of the day. I'll just show those as another Teams tab. And so you go in there and you think, okay, I'll just show the files behind this team and I'll show that folder, but Teams won't let you show a specific subfolder beneath it. So that didn't really work for me. And then I thought, well, I'll just show a SharePoint list because we can show that as a tab. And I went in to try and do that, and again, I got the entire contents of the files for that team. There was no way I could isolate it, I don't think, down to the folder, or maybe I could, but the viewing of it was just a file name, a file size, and some dates, which wasn't really interesting when these things were videos. I would have much rather some thumbnails and some details about the video. So what I ended up going with here was I leveraged the fact that these files are sitting inside of SharePoint. So I went back to the SharePoint site. I created a page on that SharePoint site and added a web part to it. I used the document library web part, which does allow you to specify and just show a particular subfolder within the document library. So I knew what the subfolder was, where all these recordings were getting stored, so I could just use the web part to show just that one folder. So now I had a SharePoint page that just showed the recordings from within that folder, and because it was a web part, just a SharePoint web part that I was using, I could also determine which views that I wanted to use, so I could show thumbnails on that as well. So this now gave me a page in SharePoint that presented the information the way that I wanted users to see it. Then back in Teams, you can add a tab to a SharePoint page. And so that allowed me to get a nice thumbnail view of all the recordings just as they get recorded. So again, zero touch, there's no administration. You just go in, hold a meeting. As soon as you end the meeting, these recordings automatically go to that folder. The thumbnails and everything are automatically generated and it just pops up. So now inside of our Ramp Up Teams channel, you have your session ideas as one tab and you have your video library as another tab.
Yeah, I think, and again, I'm all for these sort of no code, easy code, low code type solutions, and what you've just explained there is something that, I mean, anybody could do, right? I mean, it's just using what is there. I guess there's a lot of, and I still find there's a lot of confusion about the Teams and SharePoint relationship, but what you've just outlined and explained there and how you're using the SharePoint site that sits behind that Microsoft team, I think is something that a lot of people probably wouldn't realize initially that they could utilize it for that type of scenario. So, everything that you've written and described and outlined in that article, I think is fantastic for everybody. And it just goes again to show that, when you start with a problem, not go straight into solution mode, but you start with that problem. How do we then best approach to solve that solution is a very good way to go about it. And how's the adoption been of this? Is it something that the team's now on board with, and is it a regular weekly thing that happens?
Yep, it happens. We probably get one in each sprint cycle, which for us is every 3 weeks. Every 3 to 4 weeks, we have one of them. The first few weeks, it was just myself doing them. I was encouraging people to do them, but it took a while just to get over, that presenting to other people and being confident and talking in front of other people. But again, I think these are great skills for people to develop, and it's a it's a safe environment that people are getting the opportunity to do this as well, because these conversations are happening anyway. People were having these meetings one-on-one or in small groups and things. So the difference is, I guess, we're pressing the record button and we're giving it a name.
Yeah.
And probably the last thing that I did, I sort of mentioned at the front, was just actually calling this thing a program and almost marketing it to the team. I think went a long way towards the success of it. So there's one more tab that I stuck inside of that channel, and what I really did is I created another SharePoint page, and I really brought together all the different pieces of the program and branded it, and I created an intro video. So once I'd built this whole system, I actually ran through it, demonstrating how it would work, like what the purpose of this ramp up program was, why I was passionate about it, and the benefits I thought it could bring to our team. And I took them through, like, this is how we're going to run a session. This is where you can do your session ideas. This is how you can comment on them. This is how the voting will work. This is where you'll find all of the videos. So I created a 5-minute video, and I created one page, which was going to be the home page of this ramp up program in SharePoint. It had that blurb at the top. It had an embedded video that people could watch about the program, and then it had I think it was the last 3 sessions that we'd run, the latest videos. Then it had embedded web parts with all of the session ideas where they could vote, and then links down to the full library of all of our videos as well. So that gave the program an identity. And there was also, I just brought that SharePoint page through again into that Teams channel. Because it's one thing to sell it to your team at the start, but then it's as you bring more and more developers on, and this is where the value of these recorded assets become really valuable, is you have new people join the team, and it's like, we just brought everyone up to speed on that topic 3 weeks ago. If only you were here 3 weeks ago. But now you've got that repository of knowledge.
It's a great... Yeah, it's a great onboarding vehicle as well for anybody new.
Yeah. And as far as the adoption of it's gone, look, everyone's loving the sessions. Everyone's attending the sessions, which is great. We're getting good questions during the sessions. We're getting some good comments on the lead up to sessions. So what I've been finding is people aren't commenting on sessions that are sort of a long way off. But once we start to say, look, we might run one of these 2 sessions, or once we've locked one in and we're saying so-and-so is going to run this session on this date, then people will start putting comments on it to say, oh, can you cover this? Or are you going to cover these topics inside of that session? So that's worked well. And there's already been quite a few times where someone will be working on a task in our morning stand-up, and they'll ask for assistance, or they're not sure how something works, and the answer has been, we covered that in such and such a ramp-up video, and the person will say, oh, that's right, I was away that week, and the answer has just been, okay, go watch the ramp-up video. If you've got any questions after you've done that, just ping me.
Yeah, and they're optional?
Yes, 100% optional. Yeah. We're not running them, and the reason I didn't call it a brown bag session, and we came up with the title of ramp-up internally, was I didn't want the traditional brown bag idea of this is done in your own time. This is done over a lunchtime and it eats into your own time. Like, I see a lot of value in this, in our just making our development team more efficient, raising morale, and just us becoming a more high performing team. And part of that is not trying to take time out of people's lives. And that's not to say that there's not value in brown bag sessions that are done in lunchtimes and things like that. If your team's like disparate, they're not entirely within your control within an organization or the cross organizations, just finding a time to meet up is difficult. And if that value is there for people, then there's definitely value to lunchtime meetings. But for us, it was more that we wanted this to be part of our process as a team.
Careful, you're starting to sound like a change management user adoption specialist and not a developer. So.
If only I had to just develop, mate, that would be happy days.
Yes. Look, there's some amazing insights there, and I think that that knowledge that you've just shared there is something that's going to bring value to not only development teams, but to everybody cross-functional across organizations too. I think it's a really good example. Now, let's turn our attention a little bit now to, I guess, development side. So what's exciting you around the development space now? What is it that you're working on at the moment?
Wow. Okay. Got multiple things on the go at the moment. What's exciting me? We've been spending a lot of time with Microsoft Graph. I have been for
Yeah.
many years now. There's a lot that we're moving a lot of our customers and across from what were traditionally desktop installed products across into SaaS offerings.
Mm.
Now, a lot of the functionality that we were doing on premises was sort of running on client machines or running on servers hosted inside of people's environments. But as we move towards a SaaS offering, this is stuff that we now either do centrally from within our tenancies inside of Azure or directly within customers' tenancies. So a lot of that shift has been very interesting, but it's also meant, especially for our centrally hosted things, is doing things at a much, much larger scale than we've had to before. Because even if you're running something that's a server-side offering, so even if you're running something that's server-side offering, if you're deploying it to a client site, it's really only got a scale big enough for that one customer.
Yeah.
But when you're running these things centrally and you're doing it at a global scale, it's got to be big enough to handle all your customers globally, and it's got to be able to scale as well. So some of that stuff I find quite interesting because some of the proof of concept work and making sure that this stuff is going to be reliable and you're going to get your investment back on the development effort it takes is quite interesting. So we hear a lot of information, and a lot of the times it's true about like how scalable Microsoft's things are. But when you're hitting something like when you've got, I don't know, graph change notifications and you're wanting to listen to every mail coming into a user's mailbox to be able to file it off or do things with it, we're talking about a lot of subscriptions, a lot of notifications flying around, and just scalability of these things. And I think we've gone through a lot of battles in the early days, and I think a lot of ISVs did with throttling and SharePoint. So it's kind of that, but when you're looking at things on a really big global scale, those sorts of throttling issues or bandwidth problems or latency, they become real issues. So that's been quite interesting. That's probably very specific to the type of work that we do.
Yeah. What about outside of that? So, your role as your status as an MVP. Are you keeping abreast of development around sort of teams and all of that sort of that side as well?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
So we had do some team stuff ourselves, product wise. But I guess what excites me most about the direction that I guess here probably the right term is Microsoft 365 development story. And over the last couple of years, what we've seen is a bit of a unification of what that development story looked like, because it was really different product teams running in different directions. We had one model for SharePoint, doing SharePoint development. We had a different model for doing Teams development. We had a different model for doing Office add-in development. So it was really a confusing story, because when people sort of come to you and say, well, I want to develop for Microsoft 365, it's really, well, what part of it you want to develop for, because they're all totally different. In some ways, there is still a lot of disparities, but it is becoming a more unified story, which has been great to see. I think there's a lot of unification around the SharePoint framework. I think, and there's even the more modern stuff that's come out with Viva connections. It's based on SharePoint framework extensions as well to do the development story around that. And some of the UI, I think that's been a pain point for developers for a long time. It's like every one of those stories that I just mentioned, the SharePoint or Teams or Office add-ins, they kind of all had a different UI framework because the actual host products themselves all had different UI. So the SharePoint UI was different to Office UI, which was different to the Teams UI. They all looked and felt different. So how you developed and integrated into those products, you needed a whole different story right from the UI layer. So it's been great to see last probably 3 years. What do you call them now? The cards. Actionable messages is what's coming to mind, but that's just the implementation within Outlook. This concept of creating cards, and you're really describing what you want to be on a card without actually going down to the pixel level of it. It should be this color and it should be this font size. It's really a case of describing the structure of what you want to show on the screen, the message that you want to show on the screen, and the host products will determine what that exactly looks like best when it's showing that message for you. So I think that's been great as well. So we're really seeing unification, and that's what excites me, because it's just getting that clarity. Because a lot of the time, that's what developers are after, is that clarity of what tooling should I use and how should I use it. It's the same whenever I try and bring new developers on board, or I go out under my guise as an MVP and try to introduce people to technology. Developers are quite smart people, and they go in there with an idea and they just want to actually deliver the business value.
Focus on that, yeah.
And that bit is actually the easy bit for most developers. The hard bit is like, well, what plumbing do I need? What does my development environment need to look like? And once they get the fabled hello world happening, as soon as they can see something, hello world, I can get that happening. Right, from this point, I know what I need to do, and I can do it really quickly. But the big learning path for people is just, how do I get to this hello world? What tooling do I need on my machine? How do I build it? How do I deploy it? How do I just get the thing running? And so the easier and clearer that story can be made, the more people are going to be able to build, because they're going to get in there and they're going to be able to build right from day one,
right from the start.
Yeah,
exciting. All right, now as we wrap things up, mate, where, as I mentioned at the start, you do produce a lot of content and a lot of educational content, and I can say now, not just developer educational content, but broader than that too. So where can people find you, and where are you active and posting all this information?
My blog site is probably one of the key spots to follow me, and you'll find links off to all my other social media and everything there. So that is just CameronDwyer.com. I'm sure you'll be able to provide a link to that in the notes.
I will.
I'm active on Twitter and LinkedIn. They're my main social media avenues, where I post tips, tricks. When I come up against a problem, I usually blog about it or put something out about it, because in 2 months' time I'll have forgotten about it. I often find my own stuff and realize I've already solved this. Yes. Yep.
Many blogs start like that, don't they? As a personal sort of noteboard as well.
Yeah. Yep, they do.
Yeah. Excellent, mate. So once again, thank you very much for having a chat, and I'll make sure that we catch up again and do another episode at some point in time.
Awesome. I've enjoyed the conversation, mate. Good to see you.